We all know Pokemon isn't this incredibly difficult ball-busting series, especially not throughout the main story, but even in our journey from the first gym leader to eventually the champion, there is still quite a lot of difference in how hard exactly an opponent can feel. Sometimes the first gym leader is actually a pretty nasty opponent and the 8th gym leader is a complete pushover. Ranking doesn't necessarily translate to the strength and difficulty, which is why I thought it'd be fun to look at every Pokemon game and try to figure out which gym leader is the worst, i.e. the easiest. This is then of course based on the circumstances of the battle rather than their actual level, otherwise I'd just be naming all the first gym leaders and calling it a day. And nothing illustrates that better than Pokemon Red and Blue. Cause yeah, Brock may be a pushover if you're a Bulbasaur or a Squirtle enjoyer, but if you pick Charmander, he's actually a pretty difficult opponent. Not impossible or anything, but certainly not the easiest gym in the region for sure. That said, in FireRed LeafGreen, Charmander does get access to Metal Claw, making Brock pretty doable in the remake regardless of starter, but despite that, I would pretty confidently say the worst gym leader of both Red and Blue and their GBA remakes is actually found at the complete opposite of the Pokemon League's ranking. I don't know who at Game Freak is the genius behind the team composition of Blaine in this game, but never let him cook again. When the battle first starts, I can imagine it actually looks kinda intimidating. Blaine is described as this genius guy. His gym test is a quiz and he has 4 Pokemon, not a low number. But then he releases his first Pokemon and it's just Growlithe. And then the next one, Ponyta. Why the hell does the 7th gym leader of Kanto use 2 unevolved Pokemon? Was Magmar on his day off? Ninetales unavailable? Even Charizard would have been better than this. Not to mention that in order to get to Blaine, you must have access to Surf, meaning you presumably have a water Pokemon on your team capable of dishing out a pretty powerful water type move. So then why the need to keep Blaine so weak, as if he'd be unreasonably difficult otherwise? Not to mention that, like many Gen 1 gym leaders, Blaine's movesets are absolutely terrible. With their only fire type option being either Ember or Fire Spin, I doubt either Growlithe or Ponyta would even be able to knock out a well-trained Venusaur. Only for Rapidash to then enter the scene, while also only knowing Fire Spin to do stab damage. Arcanine at least has Fire Blast, which is something, but it's baffling to me that the second last gym leader of the game specializes in fire types, yet there is not a single Pokemon on his team that can use Flamethrower. But credit where credit is due, Game Freak went back and fixed this. In Yellow he now only has 3 Pokemon, but trading in Growlithe and Ponyta for 1 Ninetales, combined with higher levels overall, is an objective upgrade. Not to mention that both the new edition and Arcanine now know Flamethrower. Which means that, congratulations Blaine, you're no longer the worst and we need a new questionable winner. And that name is gonna be a gym leader quite close in rank to Blaine, one who wasn't elite in the original Red and Blue, but certainly better than he is in Yellow. Koga. In the original game, like many other gym leaders, his movesets were nothing to write home about, seemingly mostly focused on being annoying and tricky rather than actually hard. But at least his Pokemon of choice were strong. Muk, Weezing, those are decent picks for a mid-game gym leader, and while he too has 2 unevolved Coughing, the fact they both have Smog and Smokescreen at least gives them some utility use. Utility is still the name of the game in Yellow for Koga, arguably to an even stronger extent with the game's improved movesets, now giving him access to Toxic, Supersonic and Sleep Powder. But the choice of Pokemon this time around is so absolutely baffling and weak that it doesn't work at all. 3 Venonats and a Venomoth. That's his team. In one of the regions with the highest amount of poison Pokemon, Koga uses 4 of the same family and 1 Sabrina already used in Red and Blue at that. It's a baffling decision, I just can't wrap my head around it at all. The excuse of it being based on the anime doesn't even fly either, as Koga literally uses a Golbat in his rematch against Ash. So why he has suddenly turned into the Venonat Master all of a sudden is a complete mystery. But once again, it seems like Game Freak agreed. We're jumping ahead in time a little here, but it makes more sense to talk about Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee while we're on the topic of Kanto, and point out how, despite this mostly being a remake of Yellow, Koga's team was altered to not be so incredibly boring and bring him up to modern standards with 4 actually fully evolved Pokemon. Good work. But once again, we must start our search for the new worst gym leader in Kanto, and I can't help but feel like the winner has to be earlier in the game this time around, with especially Misty standing out in a negative sense. She's weak to, let's say, 50% of the player base's starter, has no way to counter that whatsoever, her traditional Staryu has been replaced with a bad Psyduck with 2 moves, and while Starmie remains a serious threat for a second gym leader to have, this is its weakest incarnation, with only 3 moves and a lower level. Misty in Let's Go is certainly better than Red and Blue's Blaine and Yellow's Koga, relative to the position you fight her at, obviously, but I would say she is the weakest Let's Go has to offer. And with that, we can finally shift our focus to a new region, Johto, where we can actually combine the original game with the remakes, as, spoiler alert, will be standard from here on out, due to remakes not really changing the original games much. Third versions will continue to be separate, although even that doesn't apply to Johto, with Crystal keeping almost every gym leader setup intact. That doesn't mean we're short on options though. Johto has several gym leaders with significantly flawed team setups, bizarre decisions or easy to exploit tactics. Bugsy having a Metapod and a Kakuna is certainly a choice. No gym leader should ever use even one of those, let alone 2, but purely based on the fact that Scyther is a tricky opponent so early in the game, I'm giving him a pass. Pokemon quality isn't Chuck's problem, as both Primeape and Poliwrath are strong, but the simple fact he uses only 2 of them is a bizarre decision for a 5th gym leader. I don't think I've ever had a Johto playthrough where I didn't just steamroll over this guy. It's way too late in the game to be pulling that funny business. And yet, I still don't think he's the worst. If Chuck had just 1 extra Pokemon, he'd be totally fine. But Price? Price is beyond saving. Just like Blaine, the fact Price is the second to last gym leader causes expectations. Expectations that he doesn't even come remotely close to reaching. First of all, why are all his Pokemon lower leveled than Jasmine's, despite having the same number of them? He is supposed to be 1 step stronger than her, not weaker. What is going on? We can't exactly blame it on his type being harder to deal with either, since... I mean, come on, it's Ice versus Steel. I don't need to tell you what's the better type there. And speaking of types, Piloswine, Price's ace, his big trump card, is weak to all 3 starter types. Sure, he can also hit back super effective at 2 of them, if he had a ground type move, which he doesn't have in the original 3 games at least. The remakes do fix this and also make it so his first 2 Pokemon are not lower level than Jasmine's Magnemite anymore, but the fact remains that his opening Pokemon is a Seal. A Seal. In the 7th gym. Have we learned nothing from the great Growlithe and Ponyta crisis of 1996? And this time around it wasn't even altered. There isn't a single Johto game out there where Bryce doesn't use a Seal. That's insane. While I wouldn't say his movesets are as disgustingly bad as we saw often in Gen 1, the fact remains that this Seal would need one hell of a setup to be worthy of its spot, and that it most certainly doesn't have. Piloswine does have Blizzard, which is nasty to 1 in 100 times it hits, and both Seal and Jugon can heal using Rest, but you should have no trouble bringing their HP down again before they even wake up at this point in the game. You know, maybe we've just all got it wrong. All this time, here we all were thinking that gym leaders were supposed to get stronger over the course of the game. But we have now arrived at Ruby and Sapphire, and ORAS for that matter, and for the 3rd generation in a row, the worst gym leader in the game is the 7th one. Maybe, just maybe, this was always meant as the calm before the storm before the final stretch. That would explain why the hell Tate and Liza have the nerve to only have 2 Pokemon. I think Game Freak really underestimated how difficult we would find double battles. That's the only explanation I can think of as to why the second to last gym leaders in the game would only use 2 Pokemon that can easily be defeated in 1 turn with a strong Surf. You know, the move you need to even reach their island in the first place. Oh, and did I mention their entire setup is based around the idea of them lasting? Solrock has Sunny Day and Solar Beam, a competent combo, but it does require setup, and Lunatone has Reflect and Light Screen. You might not know that, since I don't think I've ever had a Hoenn playthrough where it had the chance to use both, but still. Like, Chuck used 2 Pokemon too, but at least he was earlier in the game and didn't use them both at once like these 2 dummies. But as we've seen before in the series, Emerald stepped in and changed some things around, to the point I would say Emerald, Tate and Liza are actually quite strong. That said, Emerald's team compositions are pretty good all across the entire board, I'd say. There isn't one offensive outlier, so for the first time in this video, I have to go for the first gym leader, Roxanne. And the simple reason for that is that, despite focusing on a type that specializes in defense and being solid and sturdy, she is weak to all 3 starter Pokemon, assuming you evolve your Torchic in time. It makes Roxanne stand out as a particularly easy opponent, even among her fellow first gym leaders. And while that wasn't yet enough to give her the win in Ruby and Sapphire, with Tate and Liza fixed, she moves up to win the questionable title in Emerald, despite actually gaining another Pokemon and a held item. We continue on to the 4th generation now, throwing every Sinnoh game under the same banner, from Diamond and Pearl to Platinum and even BDSP. After 3 back-to-back gens where the 7th gym leader actually proved to be the easiest, we finally break that trend, although we're still definitely sticking to the end of the journey. Byron is gym leader numero 6 in Sinnoh, and while I think his son Roark is actually among the toughest first gym leaders we've seen so far, Byron, in regard to his own position, can't weigh up. Well, at this point, the time of ridiculously bad movesets, small teams and no fully evolved Pokemon is fully behind us. Byron still suffers from a comparable problem to Price, in the sense that his ace, Bastiodon, supposedly a defensive powerhouse, is weak to all 3 starter Pokemon, kinda ruining its niche right then and there. Its moveset is actually pretty decent and even better in Platinum, where it now has access to a Metal Burst that can really mess you up if you are slow to take it down. In BDSP it loses that again, but now has decent offensive options with Stone Edge, Flash Cannon and Thunderbolt. And sure, compared to what we've talked about so far in this video, that is really solid. But Byron's kid isn't the only one who has gotten better with the years. Every kid in Sinnoh is better than the average kid in Ruby and Sapphire, that's just how it is, just like every kid in BDSP is better than the originals. And no matter which kid you take, within the Sinnoh borders, Byron's is the least impressive. Simple as that. We see something similar as we move on to Unova, where we of course do separate the 2 games. As far as gym leader kits in a base Pokemon goes, this is probably the best of the bunch, the peak of the mountain, after which it would take a big tumble down. Not a single gym leader in Unova is a proper disaster, and most of them have really well thought out kits. Even the ones I plan on discussing because they are at the bottom of the barrel. Burke was a serious candidate for me for the simple reason that out of the 8+ gym leaders, his team definitely has the weakest setup, with his entire thing being Struggle Bug, a move that is shockingly weak in Gen 5. However, simply due to the fact that this team at the very least requires some thinking out of you, with his Leavanny a pretty strong Pokemon at this point in the game, I'm going with our favorite triplets instead, Silent, Chili and Cress. You see, this could have been one of the hardest first gyms in existence, with a Lillipup that has devoted its life to the power of Workup and an Elemental Monkey that's strong against your starter. But because you get handed another Elemental Monkey strong against this one, the battle suddenly becomes a formality. Because now you can just use your starter to beat away at the Lillipup before some monkey-on-monkey warfare should make easy work of what is supposed to be their ace. Has it ever happened before that a Pokemon game just outright gave you such an obvious get out of jail free card right before a battle? I don't think that has happened. There's the Onyx in Violet City before Faulkner, but at the very least that's a trade, so this one I think is still the more outrageous one, instantly making the first gym of Unova the easiest. But since Silent, Chili and Cress aren't in Black and White 2, we must begin our search anew 2 years later. Of course, the first person that comes to mind to fill the vacant spot is Burke, who definitely hasn't gotten much better, I admit, even if his levels are a little higher, assuming you play normal mode. His Whirlipede has been replaced with a Swatloon as well, with his Whirlipede now instead moving to another contender, the newcomer Roxy. She has a mere 2 Pokemon, with Whirlipede as her ace, alongside a Coughing. It's far from elite, and the only way she's remotely difficult is if she can set up her Poison Venoshock combo, which admittedly is more likely to fail than work, seeing as her means of inflicting poison are not guaranteed or powerful. So as long as you don't waste too many turns, she should be doable. But on the other hand, Swatloon is about the last thing Burke needed. It means his team is now even weaker to fire than it was before, and Swatloon's moveset adds very little new tricks to his playbook, arguably more so removing them in favor of just another weaker Leafani. It's weird. Both Burke and Roxy are largely unimpressive, and yet both are probably the best kits we've seen so far in this video. In any other game they wouldn't be contenders, I'm confident about that. But okay, we have to make a call, so I'm going Burke, personally, with the fact he's one gym later making the difference, as by this point Black and White 2 have given you ample opportunity to catch Pokemon that can deal with his blatant weak spots. Next up is X and Y, and man, it's like Game Freak challenged themselves to make these kids as weak as they possibly could. Ramos, Wolfric, Valerie, the list goes on. So many gym leaders here, even late ones, have Pokemon without 4 moves or just terrible overall tactics and strategies, like Ramos and Grass Knot. That's way too situational a tactic for a gym leader to use. But despite how poorly designed all of these are, I cannot overlook the absolute and factual weakest of the bunch, the first gym leader, Viola. Seriously, what is this team? This Surskit, level 10 with Bubble, Water Sport and Quick Attack might genuinely be the worst Pokemon a gym leader has ever had. And the ace to top it off is none other than probably the worst ace a gym leader has ever had, a level 12 Vivillon with Harden, Tackle and Infestation. Now, do keep in mind that at this point in the game, despite this being the first gym, you can have already caught like 15 Pokemon, plenty of which are super effective to bug and wipe the absolute floor with Viola. I've tried not to keep what you can catch, but might not influence the judgings too much, but the number of Pokemon obtainable prior to this battle that are very effective in it are simply too high to be ignored. Not to mention that I'm quite positive any team of 6 should have absolutely zero problem winning this battle, regardless of who you caught. That's how bad Viola's setup is. Now, I really tried to not leave Gen 7 out of the fun for this video, despite their lack of gym leaders, but unfortunately, comparing trial captains to kahunas to even totem Pokemon proved too tricky to accurately work for this video, and they all replace gym leaders in their own way. So instead, we're gonna keep it to gym leaders only and move on to Gen 8 and Galar. Compared to Gen 6, this is a very interesting region, in the sense that while most of Gen 6's gym leaders are absolutely terrible, Gen 8s are, on paper, really strong. They have really powerful Pokemon, even early ones. The game has a high average level curve, so their levels look quite imposing, and yet, in-game they're really not that hard. And that's all because, well, they might have high levels, but you do as well as the fact that, even more so than Gen 6, you have a huge variety of Pokemon available to you, courtesy of the wild area and raid battles. You can have a super diverse team very early on in the game, to the point that no matter how strong the Pokemon are these gyms throw at you, simply the fact that they're monotype makes them quite easy to deal with. And yeah, it's a boring answer, but none are as easy as Milo, the first gym leader located in Turffield. And the reason, honestly, is very comparable to Viola. In a game with so many Pokemon available early on, you just can't get away with only using 2 on your team. You can Dynamax all you want, there's no escaping that fatal flaw in a game built like this. Not to mention that his Pokemon only have 3 moves, and are all attacking ones at that. There's nothing Milo can do to shift the tide of battle. Now, don't get me wrong, he isn't the worst first gym leader by a country mile, but he does very much follow the same train of thought as his fellow Galar gym leaders, and simply due to them being later in the game, they have a lot more weapons at their disposal and Milo feels undercooked. And then we have Paldea, where for basically the same reason, we once again have to look at the early gym leaders to find our winner. And yeah, I'm not following along with the whole you can challenge everyone at any point thing. Not only does that greatly complicate the concept we're using, there's also clearly a designated order that we're gonna assume you follow here. And if you do, then I cannot see another gym leader winning out over Katie or Brashius. Both their teams are frankly awful, simple as that. They at least have 3 Pokemon, accounting better for the fact you can catch a heat before ever fighting them, but their kits are so bad. All the 6 Pokemon they have between them know a grand total of 2 moves. 2! I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. But it's hardly unique in Scarlet and Violet, unfortunately. Anyway, I think both of these are genuinely horrible setups, But the simple fact of the matter is that miniature level bump aside, Brashius is barely any better than Katie, despite being the second gym leader and being found in an area where you can expect to level up more and get new Pokemon, especially when coming from Cartondo. But instead, his team is built as if you teleport straight to his gym and don't gain another level or new team member. It's a very strange philosophy and it doesn't work. So, sorry Brashius, you can have a fun Terra Sudowoodo all you like, it doesn't stop you from being the worst gym leader in Paldea. And that has been every game. What are your picks for the biggest pushovers in Pokemon history? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.